All right, welcome back, everybody. It's been a few week hiatus. I'm excited to get back on Coffee with Coaches. We're a little late in the day here, so admittedly, I'm not drinking any coffee. We've got some plain old H2O here, but I suppose I do have my coffee mug just for a warm reminder of what we're doing right now. Um, Joined here with Coach Loretta and Coach Jacob Moss. Jacob's got some fun things coming up in the next couple of weeks here, so we're gonna have a good conversation talking with him about all things running and what kind of adventures he's up to. But Coach Loretta, how are you doing today? What's new?
I am doing great. I'm currently in Boulder, so we finished our van build, and so we're living out of our camper van for the next or a total of about a month. And so we're out here in Colorado, and I have had a little communication with Jacob. So I'm also acclimating to the altitude at this point, and so it was kind of interesting because I just came back from Netherland, which is about 9,000 feet elevation, and now back in Boulder, which is closer to 5,500. So this morning's run was so much easier, just coming down the mountain a little bit. I'm like, wow, why do I feel so much better? But so that was fun. And yesterday I had the opportunity to run the Magnolia Road, which, if for those of you that don't know, it's like an iconic road where all the elites and Olympians have trained on. It's about a 12-mile stretch from Netherland to almost to Boulder. And it was absolutely amazing. Just beautiful scenery surrounded by mountains. I was dropped off and picked up. And I did have some times where I was a little bit scared on my own because there's a few signs out there that said mountain lions active in the area. And so I was like, oh, and then there's a sign that says, beware of small children and animals. And I'm like, I'm the size of a child and I'm running. Is it going to think, should it chase me? Anyhow, so I did sing loudly in those sections to myself, but it was absolutely amazing, just stunning views. So I can see why everybody likes to do it, but also very, very hard. The ascents were straight down. so, so yeah,
And okay, so are you calling on Starlink today, or are you at
I
a?
am.
Okay,
I'm on
wonderful, because you're
Starlink.
coming in pretty well. I'm very surprised.
Yeah. Yeah. Starlink has worked amazing for us. Both of us have been working remotely and it's really been really high quality. So today I'm heading up to Copper Mountain for the weekend. It's my birthday weekend. And so we're going to be doing an all weekend concert. And there's a 5K up the mountain and it's around 11, I think it's around 11,000 feet and climbs to 12,000 feet. Super hard 5K, but I'm excited to do it. We get dropped off in a ski lift. So it should be a
Well,
fun adventure.
happy birthday, and thanks for
Thanks.
sharing all of that with us. It's fun following along your journey. So for anybody out there, go to Loretta's handle at Instagram, and you'll be able to see all the cool things that she's up to. Um, Coach Jacob, how are you? What's new? Where are you at? Where are you calling from? What's going on?
Yeah, a lot's new. So I am out in Font-Romeu in France, training for Spartathlon. So definitely sharing a lot of that same altitude preparation that Loretta is experiencing right now. Um, Definitely some things to get used to, especially with the hills. I was looking at some of my training from when I was in Charleston, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna probably use metric a lot more than you guys care for, because everyone here talks in kilometers and meters and everything. So, um, yeah, but I had been running around 250 meters of elevation gain per week, which is it's less than 1,000 feet. It's about 3.5 feet to the meter. So probably around 900 feet of gain per week that I was putting in at Charleston. And now I'm putting in 3,000 meters, which is a lot more. So it's closer to like 10,000 feet per week. And I've been trying to stay away from the hills. So, just for what it's worth, it's definitely been a big change in that regard, but I think it's being beneficial so far. So, yeah, that's kind of
Yeah,
where I
it's
am.
definitely going to be beneficial because it looks like you have a big hill coming up in your next race that we'll talk about.
Yes, yes, for sure.
Yeah. Can you talk
So,
about, Jacob, why you're in France right now? What brought you there and what's going on?
Yeah, so I've been working a lot on connections and everything and who I can connect with, and um, I got a good connection with ASICS, and I was able to talk with them some, and I'm training at their Choho camp in Europe, which is in Font Romeu. So they have a camp here. It's got some things like treadmills downstairs and sauna use and jacuzzi and cold baths and things like that. It'll house, I think, around 20 athletes at a time. So a lot just left for the Olympics right before I came. So that's kind of where I am, what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So yeah,
That's so awesome. Congratulations on that.
thank you,
I
thank
see
you.
your basic on. Nice.
And what's your next event coming up?
So my next event is Spartathlon. Uh, it's a race that runs from Athens to Sparta in Greece. It's a very historic race, so many would call it the original marathon if you're not familiar. It's where Pheidippides ran to tell King Leonidas that they needed more reinforcements. They were in the middle of a war, and he ran a 153-mile route, 246 kilometers, and then would have had to go back as well. But the race is just put on in one direction. So,
That's awesome. How long did it take him? Do we
hmm,
know?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I I think that is somewhere, but I don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so 150 miles is like what is considered like Pheidippides is considered like the grandfather of the marathon. But I just think it's kind of funny that, like the grandfather of the marathon is really an ultra marathoner.
Yes.
So kudos to all the ultra marathoners out there. But anyways, okay, so we have this really cool goal. It's in Greece, you're in France. When is the race? Like, when are you going to be making your way over there? Have you gotten to check out the course yet, the route?
Yeah, so I have had the course on my Garmin for probably a few months now, just so I can familiarize myself with it and know what's where. I've gone through lots of, blog posts, and I've watched different documentaries on the race just so I can be more familiar. I haven't been over to, well, I did land in Athens and then flew to Barcelona, but I didn't get to spend any time in Athens. Um, so I'll have 3 more weeks here after this week is over. It's like 2 days left. And then I'll fly over to Athens and I'll have a week there. So that'll play into my heat acclimatization too, which will be good. So it's definitely been a training experience, uh, definitely a learning curve for so many different moving parts. So.
Yeah, can you talk about those too? I think it's really fascinating, like, hearing you say that there's a lot of different moving parts and learning curves and things like that. And I know you're pretty analytical in your training, and like, how are you like breaking down this big, scary, audacious goal?
Yeah, so I mean, when it comes to what I'm doing right now, I have multiple parts. One is training at altitude. Another is I was training on flat in Charleston, so now I'm building in hills. Um, because of altitude, I have to change diet some. I have the high heat that I have to deal with at Spartathlon. Um, so multiple things going on. Um, so I guess I can start with maybe heat and what that's looked like. So kind of where I started was in Charleston, no problem with heat with heat there. If you're familiar with Charleston, it is almost Florida. It's not as hot as Florida, but it's about as close as you can get without feeling like you're blistered every day. And when I left Charleston, I was doing my runs in the morning and 85-degree weather when it was 6, 7 a.m. already. And I would come back completely drenched like I'd gotten out of the swimming pool. Many of y'all are familiar with what that is like. Uh, so definitely had no problem with heat training there. The thing that I've had to work through is what is it going to look like for making sure I'm prepared for Spartathlon. My first week in Font Romeu wasn't too bad. I was still in the probably mid 70s as the highs, so I would hit some of my runs in the heat of the day. But now it's gotten down to probably 60-degree highs. It was a 60 high today. So trying to figure out how I'm going to do that. I found out that doing sauna immediately after a run is very beneficial because it helps maintain blood plasma volume. So I've worked with doing that. I've been doing layers. Layers has been really important. I just did a post not long ago on Instagram about, I was running in black tights. I was wearing a black long sleeve shirt with another black shirt over top of that, along with a, a beanie, and running in the heat of the day. Heat of the day. It's cold out still, but getting as much as I can in, and then coming back and getting in the sauna right after. So doing things like that. I've been trying to focus on building specific heat to and training. I found a path that I'll be doing this Saturday. It'll be for my long run. I plan to run 46K, and that path will go toward the heat. So as you know, when you drop in elevation, your heat goes up. So where I am staying, I'm at 1,800 meters, which is probably 7,000 feet, I believe. So I'll run east, and I'll get into temperatures that are closer to 80. So that'll be a big change. I'll drop from here down to 600 meters during that run. So that's just the heat piece that I've been trying to, piece together and figure out how am I going to make sure that I don't lose what I had in Charleston. How do I still build on it some? And then I'm going to finish that off with tapering in Athens, making sure to run in the heat of the day and things like that. So it's a lot, but just that one piece is enough to, figure out what's going on and what do I need to do.
Right. What temperatures do you anticipate for race day?
Race day will be low 80s probably
Okay.
as a high, maybe mid 80s is what I'm seeing. But I've heard of some years it getting up to in the 90s. So trying to be prepared for anything. I know it's a lot of it's full sun, be running on asphalt, so the heat coming up from it is a lot. So that's a lot of where I want to make sure that even though it says, 85 degrees, the heat coming up off of asphalt in the middle of the day when it's full sun is a lot more than 85 degrees.
Sure. What's the humidity like there?
It's higher humidity. It'll probably be, I think, 60, 70% ish. So not like Charleston. I mean, when I was running in Charleston, that's 90% plus humidity. So not that bad, but it's still coastal. So it'll still be high humidity. I expect probably worse at nighttime, which is better because it's cooler. But yeah.
So just to paint the picture here of the race, I'm looking at Spartathlon.gr, and it's got like some really cool info on it, and some of the descriptions it's a race that crosses muddy paths, vineyards, olive groves, climbs steep hillsides. Like couple that with between 60 to 80 degree temperatures, albeit maybe a little bit humid for what we're currently experiencing in the Midwest right now. It sounds like it's going to be like a beautiful day come race day. And I think the hard thing about like 80 degrees is that it's not like hot, right? Like it's not so hot that you're planning for it to be hot, but it's sneaky hot because it'll make you go too hard. And then then your internal temp goes up. But I mean, it sounds like you're doing a great job, like taking care of that piece too, to just like get in the sauna after that. And I know like there's some other, like Tim Tollefson comes to mind, who's like a super proponent of like going out for his run and then getting like in a hot water submersion, just like via shower, or David Roach does like hot water submersion via his hot tub. So I think that's like kind of almost like when athletes talk about living high and then training low, getting kind of like the benefits of like, okay, I'm living at altitude and I'm getting the altitude in the hematocrit bump. But then when you go and you train low, you can train the skeletal muscular system because you can actually push your body harder, whereas you're limited like with less oxygen at higher temps. It's almost like kind of like an analog to what you're doing with heat training, where it's like, yeah, you're not like training in super hot conditions. So you're not really throttled with your paces, and we're not making like your typical like easy mileage pace too grueling because it's so taxing on the body, because heat is a tax, right? So like we all know if we go out for an easy run and it's like super hot and humid, like sometimes you get a little bit zapped like the rest of the day just because of it. So it almost sounds like this cool dichotomy of like, okay, yeah, we're going to go out. We're either going to push pace if it's a workout day. We're going to be able to recover if it's a recover day. But then like also have this other side piece of like, okay, now that we got the body, the actual running stimulus, now we can go and get like the blood plasma stimulus of the heat training. So it sounds like, you know, a good comprehensive plan to all those wheels that you were mentioning before that are turning, you know, that are going to be a part of the race.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned multiple things even there that we could hit on too. And one of those things being, you know, when I was running in Charleston, even in like the evening when it was cooler, so I didn't have to worry about the heat, or if I ran on treadmill, then my heart rate would still be higher than usual. Whereas now I'm probably 10% lower at the same pace. So, I mean, there are things that change when you're at altitude also that they all affect people differently too. So a lot of people will have a drop in VO2 max when they go to altitude. I've been very particular about supplementation before I came to altitude and when I've gotten here. I haven't had any drop in VO2 max at all. I've increased by 5 points according to Garmin now. So that's been phenomenal. I think that the top two supplements I've been doing for that are ashwagandha and rhodiola, which are both adaptogens that help adapt to stress. They can help adapt to altitude in particular. They can also help adapt to heat. So those are two that I've stayed on probably 3 weeks before I left Charleston, and then I've stayed on them all the way through. So that's been, I think, of course, this is my first time at altitude, so I can't know for 100%, but I'm pretty sure that that's the reason that I've not experienced a loss in VO2 max at all. I've actually gone up a lot. So right now I'm higher than I've ever been, which is unreal. So
I do
That's
know
exciting.
of athletes in particular too that will supplement with like a low dose iron, say in like a multivitamin or something if they're not like typically used to it. Because of course we know that like as runners we get this like foot strike hemolysis, which just makes us a little bit more predisposed to having lower iron levels, especially since like our bodies are burning like so much energy and like tissues are turning over so quick. Like it's just a stress on the body. So you go through some micronutrients a little bit quicker than the average bear. So, you know, I think that's great. It's almost kind of like, you know, how we would recommend people to like, hey, make sure you're hydrated before your workout, or like make sure like you've had a snack a couple hours before your workout and you're not hungry. You kind of take that same mental approach to like going to altitude is like, okay, like the altitude is going to be a stress on my body. So let's just make sure I'm like kind of prepared for it. Like that can definitely be applicable to anybody who's, say, like going on an impromptu trip out to Colorado and, you know, haven't been at altitude in a super long time, or, you know, is going for, you know, just like a hiking trip or a spur of the moment, or, you know, if you don't have these extended periods to adapt to altitude, you know, then maybe you can kind of make your body a little bit more robust before going in. And of course, we also know that like going into altitude with a good amount of fitness is also going to be a great idea, just to be able to perform then when you're at altitude. So it doesn't sound like you like weren't training at all. I mean, you know, like no, none of us athletes are ever like not training for something, right? Like we all love to be out there and running and stuff like that. But that's another critical component. So like, I guess just kind of like, you know, we don't have to get into like the super nitty gritty details, but like, I am kind of interested, like you got a 150-mile race coming up. you've been traveling. Like, what has training looked like in the past month, say like, you know, like a month before going out to France, and like, what does it look like right now? Like, what like overarching like types of workouts are you running? Like, how are you thinking about like structuring your body so that way you can perform your best in a 150-mile race?
Yeah, so generally I'll train more similar to a marathon type than I do think in terms of, 150 miles. And the reason why is because I always want to think about how high I can push the aerobic limits. So I know that the marathon is the highest point of fat utilization that's possible. You burn fat faster at that pace than you do any other pace, and that's where that limit tops off. So that's also where I am able to use more oxygen than any other pace. So knowing that I kind of hit that balance there is a big key for me. And I aim to really focus on pushing that limit as high as I can. So with that being said, you were also mentioning, having to run through the different hills and things like that in Spartathlon, which there is a really, really good hill. I think it climbs 640 meters in 2.2 kilometers, which is roughly 1,000 feet or so or more in a mile, and over a mile, like a mile and a half. So it's a lot of gain in that little portion. So a lot of what I've been doing is taking what I normally do and adding a hill component to it. And what that looks like is I maintain my short intervals in the middle of the week for the most part, but then my long intervals, when I do them, I'll focus on doing hills at the beginning and hills at the end. So probably the best example I can give for this is I'm at 1,800 meters now. I went up to Plateau de la Calme, which is about 2,300 meters. And what I did there is there's a parking lot that's flat. It's almost a quarter mile, 400 meters ish. It's a little shorter. And there's a really big hill that goes down. And I ran down that 2K and back up that 2K. And down it, I was running probably about a 5:30 pace, and up it, I was running around a 6:45 pace, which, I mean, it's a really steep hill, so it was a lot of work. And then I did a 6x1K with 1K recovery, and I pushed those at a 5:30, and I did that on the flat. And then I did the 2K down and 2K up again. So the idea is, how am I going to take this training and build as much strength as I can around the beginning and end? So that's one thing I did. Another thing is I was going to do a 7x3K with 1K recovery, and I changed that one also. I did 4 of them instead. And at the end of the 3K, I had a 500 meter that I ran uphill really hard and then came back down during my 1K recovery. And then I did another workout that evening and made it a special block. So those are some of the things that I'm doing in training to make sure that not only am I being specific with raising my aerobic capacity as high as I can, but I'm also making sure that I build the strength around what I have to have for this race in particular.
One observation and one question. I love that type of workout. I think it's a beautiful. So I guess there's other people that use this workout. Killian Jornet is going to be like a very prominent mountain athlete, ultra athlete, trail athlete. He does something very similar where he'll do like a VK and then do a tempo run on flat and then do another VK, which is great. Steve Magnus is another prominent coach in the track world who does he calls them broken tempos, where you do like a tempo and then some hill repeats and a tempo, or you can structure that any way that you want. Hill repeats, tempo, accumulating a couple hill repeats over the course of like an hour and a half with maybe like, anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes of like tempo paces like worked in there. And you can split that up any way that you want. But I think that's like a really great idea for like skeletal muscular durability and efficiency, right? Like you kind of like go in like kind of pre-fatiguing your legs with the eccentric stimulus of downhill, making them a little bit less capable of producing those same speeds or those same power. So it takes those same efforts and makes them a little bit harder on your muscles, even if they're not quite so challenging on the cardiovascular system. And I feel like that's something that we all like experience at the end of an ultra race is it's like, yeah, like by mile like 90 out of a 100-mile race, you're probably not limited by how hard you can breathe, like in a 5K or in like a 1-mile race. You're probably more limited by your like, trashed up quads.
Yeah.
So that's just my one comment because like I absolutely love those types of workouts. But I think the
Yeah.
caveat too is like I usually like to see people do like just hill training in and of itself and tempo in and of itself before you like mash the both of them together. It's like work on stimulus A and then work on stimulus B and then work on stimulus AB together,
Yeah. Well, and generally what I'll do, like what I did for Canal Corridor when I ran my 100-mile PR, is I was doing 10 to 12 by 300 meter uphill, and I was doing those in 20 seconds. I mean, not 20 seconds, that would be blistering fast. 60 seconds. So I was doing those in a minute at a time, and I was doing jog back recoveries. And so I wasn't doing, the eccentric loading and things like that, but I was running a flat, fast 100-miler. Now I am going to have both, and I'm going to have it very substantially throughout. So the downhill is a really good observation that you pointed out, because that's why I'm doing the push down the hill and then the push back up the hill. So that's exactly why I'm doing that.
Yeah, and I think in coaching for me too, like I really try to keep an eye on like if my athletes are doing the jog downhill versus the walk downhill that like I specifically put inside of people. Like I don't know if you look at that too when you're structuring other people's training, but I'm like, I can see when you weren't really walking down because like, like if we're like, 4 to 8 weeks out from a race or so, and it's something that's pertinent to somebody's training, it's like, yeah, jog down, get that eccentric load. We got plenty of time to, to recover from that workout. But then if we're like within like, 2 to 3 weeks of a race or so, it's like, okay, let's walk back down. You've already built up
Yep.
these like muscular benefits. Now let's just like focus on recovery. But a lot of times too, people are like, oh, well, I ran down it last week, so why wouldn't I run down it this week? It's like,
Right.
because of that skeletal muscular load,
Well, and
but yeah, I say that all too, just because I think it is an advanced workout that, like working on the individual components, I feel like is going to be dynamite,
yeah, and that's another good point, because a week and a half out from I believe it's a week and a half, I've scheduled out 10 by 300 meter uphill. So I'll still be running that workout. I'll still do jog down recovery, but it's going to be lightening the load. I'll do them faster than what I've been doing on, like a 2K up and 2K down, or things like that. I'll be doing the 300 meters much faster, but I'm not going to trash myself quite as much. I'm just going to get a good stimulus and push myself into a good taper.
Yeah, completely. Okay, so with that was okay. So that was my one comment. I had one question, and it is escaping me right now. So, Loretta, maybe if you have anything to add, I'll come back to it. I know I kind of went on a long tangent there.
So you're
It'll come
talking
back
about
to
some
me.
of the speed work that you're doing. What are you doing as far as longer efforts right now?
So longer efforts are generally outside of the 3K with 1K recovery, 5 by 5K with 1K recovery, things like that. I'm doing longer fartleks. So two of my favorites are 20 by 1 minute on, 1 minute off, plus 20 by 30 second on, 30 second off. And then building that to a 30 by 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. 30 by 1 minute on, 1 minute off, and then 30 seconds on and off. What I just did was a 26 by 400 meter with 400 meter recovery. Did that just this last week. I had to do it on the treadmill, and it wouldn't go fast enough for me, so it slowed me down a little bit. But it only went to like a 5:35 pace, I think. But I got in a good workout. I still got a good stimulus, and it was inside too, so it was hotter. We had a couple of really rainy days here, and it was really cold for those, so I opted for the indoor run instead. So that was definitely beneficial. Those are some of the longer ones that I'm doing. I have a 500 meter with 300 meter recovery. I like to focus on those shorter intervals though. When you push to a faster pace and then you pull back to something that's just below it, you get, for those that are familiar, a lactate shuttle going. So you produce lactate and then you use that lactate for fuel and you bounce back and forth. And if you can find that right rhythm, you can do a lot of them. You can get a really good training stimulus.
Ooh, okay. So I remember what my previous question was, but I like that you brought up the lactate shuttle system. I just did a workout recently on Sunday after a half marathon, and it was designed along the same thing. I'm in like the last couple weeks of like a prep before a 100-mile race, right? And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I don't want to generate a ton of lactate in hydrogen ion. It's not the lactate that's killer, it's the hydrogen ion that'll make your muscles burn. And if you're above that threshold, like it'll hamper your recovery, and it'll kind of dig you a little bit further into a fatigue hole. So I mean, a great proxy for what your lactate threshold would be like an hour to an hour 15-minute effort, right? So like
Yep.
that's about that's about my half marathon pace, a little bit faster than that. For other people, say if you ran like a recent 10K and you're coming in at like 50 minutes or you're coming in at 40 minutes, okay, you can estimate that it's probably going to be a little bit slower than your 10K pace. So that's a great way to figure out like what that higher threshold is. And then a great way to figure out what that lower threshold is like, what's your like 3 hour pace? What's your 4 hour pace? What's that like
Yep.
marathon pace? So like my workout was jumping back and forth between a half mile, like just underneath that lactate threshold, and then pulling back to a marathon pace. And I experienced the same thing that you're mentioning, where it's like, well, now we're taking marathon pace and making it the recovery. So your body's
Yep.
getting used to shuttling through not a ton of lactate and hydrogen ion, but just like a little bit of extra buildup that it didn't have before. I love those workouts. But my
Yep.
original question, which actually pertains to this, is so you're at altitude. I get the question all the time as a coach, and you probably do too. Like, are we looking at pace to determine your effort? Are we looking at rate of perceived exertion to determine your effort? Were you going by heart rate, or like, are you thinking about all of those at the same time? Because we know as we go to altitude, like your RPE is going to be different. We know that your heart rate's going to be different, and we know that your like feel is going to be different
Yep.
of how hard you're running. How are you gauging all of those variables to determine like, yeah, compared to my North Carolina or my sea level time, like,
Yep.
or my sea level pace, where am I at?
Yeah. So
That's a great
generally,
question.
I'm a spreadsheet person. I know you all know this, but some of our listeners may not. I love spreadsheets, and one thing that I use is 30-day rolling average of heart rate, pace, etc. So of course, coming from Charleston to here, I don't have um, a good gauge for where I am yet because I don't have 30 days of data. Instead, I do take for the first probably 2-3 days a easy feel. One of the things by the way, just for any listeners that want a way to find a good easy pace without having to worry about it, set yourself a map on your watch that will take you somewhere on a new route you've never been before, and go out and leave it on only the map and follow that map. And if you stay focused on the map the entire way, and then you come all the way back, you'll find that you ran your easy pace, more than likely. It distracts you. You don't know where you are. All you have to tell yourself is, let's run easy. So that's one of the things that I've done here is, the shuttle will come and take us somewhere, and I'll run a new route that I've never seen before, and I'll have to follow the map on my watch. In that case, I don't have a course downloaded, but I'm just following the red line that I've set on my watch. I can see it track me the whole way, and then come back. So that's one way that you can get an easy feel. And then I start using a 7-day rolling average because eventually I'll get kind of locked in, this is what I'm averaging for heart rate, and I'm averaging it on this pace, and I can use that as my data point for moving forward. So then I'm able to see all of my zones, which I use by pace. So I'll put in, I'm averaging this pace, I'm averaging this heart rate, I'm averaging or I have this as my VVO2 max pace, and I'm able to use that to kind of triangulate where I am. And that's the same way I run it for my athletes too. So I found that that's a really effective way of doing it. And when you use a 30-day rolling average, even as it gets colder outside and you increase in fitness, then your pace will drop and you'll be able to use those new paces as you move forward. Or as it gets hotter, then your pace will constantly increase or heart rate will go up and you'll have to adjust your training that way. So using a 30-day rolling average is typically the easiest way to go about it for me.
Oh, that's great. I like that. I do like paces as proxies to like, for certain variable or for certain efforts given like some of those other variables are being paid attention to. So it sounds like so like when you got to altitude then you ran your VVO2 and VVO2 just a reminder is the velocity at VO2. So it's like how fast are you
Yep.
moving at the point at which you can't utilize any more oxygen in your body for
Yeah.
movement. So you ran a test like that, and then you're paying attention to your easy paces. So
I
that kind
didn't.
of gives you this window, right?
So I didn't actually do a VVO2 max test though.
Okay.
Um, I still kind of use my baseline for where I should be
Mhm.
because that's going to keep me in my zones. Now,
Okay.
the way that I run it through, when I change my average training pace and average training heart rate, I can see if I call it in or out of balance. So say my zones laid out are supposed to be certain percentages, then I know that as soon as my pace drops from my average training pace, I'm able to see if that's now out of balance. So if it was 50 to 60% and now it's, 45 to 55%, then I'm 5% out of balance. So then I know that, okay, while I'm at altitude, I'm roughly 5% lower at VVO2 max than I was. That might be a little more detailed than a lot of people would care to get, but that is how I actually run it.
Oh, cool. Okay, I understand. Yeah, that's interesting. That's really cool. So then when you're racing, are you paying attention to heart rate? Are you paying attention to, I mean, it's hard to pay attention to pace in a 150-mile race. Like, what are
Yeah.
you paying attention to then when you're executing?
This is going to be the hardest part about this race for me because I have so many variables with it. I'm glad I have the week in Athens before because I'll be able to get my baseline again before I race and I'll be able to reacclimate to the heat. But um, I don't want to go out too fast. That's been the number one thing that I've heard from people for Spartathlon in particular, which I've looked at the studies. It shows a J-shaped curve, a backward J-shaped curve. So it looks like what I mean by that is you slow down consistently. And if you think about just a speed up at the end, that's what it looks like. Um, so it looks very similar to a 24-hour race, which I've looked at too, and it looks like most people, most of the top runners average 24-hour race pace. So I've looked at probably the top 10, 15 runners that have ran Spartathlon that also have 24-hour performances within like a couple months, and they're all right around 100%. So I think that I'm probably going to go primarily by what does my 24-hour race pace look like once I get to Athens. But the hardest part is not starting too fast. When I ran
Mhm.
Canal Corridor, I started a 6:45 pace and it worked out great. And I'm in better shape than that now. But starting at that pace, I know Fotis started at a 6:30 pace when he started his course record. Um, so, I mean, it's kind of hard to think about starting a 153-mile race that fast, So 7-minute mile sounds fast for starting a race, whether you've run 7-minute miles for 100 or not. So
For sure.
it's just the way it is. So
Totally.
did that answer
So
well?
yeah, totally. We got like an insight of like what you're thinking about for your effort, like while you're racing and just before as you're leading up to the race. Couple other questions too. Like, okay, so on the topic of race execution, like I'm really interested with like what you're going to be doing for nutrition, and then crew too. I think And just to like preface the crew question, I think it's really interesting how many people use crews, right? Like they're definitely a staple in ultra running. And I'm wondering if you have a crew, if you've thought about it, if you brought somebody out, if you have a team member, or if you're just going to go and crew yourself. But let's start with nutrition first.
Yeah, so nutrition it's kind of difficult for me to think through also at the moment. I've done a lot of 24-hour races where it's a lot cooler. So figuring out what I'll be doing with a higher sweat rate is one of the things that I really want to stay on top of. When I ran my last 24-hour, my ankle blew up and ended up the size of a softball, but that's a different conversation. But I found out during that race that I can cut some of my fluid and be just fine. So generally, I've done 32 to 34 fluid ounces per hour, and I've alternated a carb drink and a electrolyte drink that's low in carb. There's a big reason for that, and that is if you have a carbohydrate problem, you can always fix it. You can spike your blood sugar by throwing a handful of M&Ms in your mouth or drinking a Mountain Dew. It doesn't really matter. You can get your blood sugar up very quickly. But if you have an electrolyte problem, it's not so easy to fix. So I always keep them separate, and I make sure my crew knows that if I get full at any point and I don't want to take things in, the only thing that I have to take in is electrolytes. Because I know that the easy fix is carbs. So that's a big thing. So what I found is I can hit 22 and a half ounces very steadily without having to use the restroom at all. And that's the goal. So what that looks like for me is every 7 minutes, I take 3.5 ounces, with the third of those 7 minutes being a gel. So it used to be all 4 of those 7-minute blocks were all liquid. So it was just all electrolyte drink or carb drink. But I supplemented one of the carb drinks with a gel instead to cut a little bit of fluid, but still keep the carbs going in. I might have to change that back to fluid for Spartathlon, which I'm not sure on yet. I know it'll be hotter. I might need to do that during the day and not during the night. But that's kind of where I'm thinking right now.
Awesome. Okay, so a follow-up question. Question one, it's a two-part question. Question
Yep.
one is, have you thought about how many grams per hour you're going to be consuming in carbohydrates? And question two is, what do you think about, right now more than ever, I'm definitely seeing a split in how people are fueling their races. There's a lot of talk about going like high carb. And for the past 15 to 20 years, high carb meant like 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrates like per hour.
Now it's like
And now we're
220.
talking, yeah, now people are pushing like 100 to 120, and not just in the cycling world. David Roche just set or reset Matt Carpenter's Leadville record, and I think he was pushing anywhere between like 120 to 140 grams of carbohydrates per hour, and that's about 4 to 500 calories per hour, which is a lot. So we kind of have this
Yep.
split between like, are we going like new high carb, meaning like 100 plus, or are we going a little bit lower? So I guess, like, what is your plan for race day per hour? And then what do you think about kind of the redefining of the nutrition principle that we're seeing these days?
So I think that to have that conversation well, you also have to talk about the athlete's diet. Because I mean, you can have very, very high, very fast burning fats. And if you prepare yourself right, you can burn a lot of fat very fast. And I think we store somewhere, even the leanest athlete stores somewhere around 20,000 calories of fat, which you're going to max out at 2,000 to 2,200 calories of carbohydrate. So the traditional way that I've looked at it is, okay, let's say I'm going to run 100 miles. Let's assume 100 calories per mile. I need 10,000 calories. At that intensity, I should run roughly 50-50 fat and carb, which means I need 5,000 calories. Then I'm going to take that and just split it up across all my miles. So I think in terms of calories, more so rather than grams, how much energy do I need? Because that energy is directly related to the output that I'm doing. So if my output changes, I'm going to need more energy. That's why I think in that way instead of grams. Now, I know like Zach Bitter, when he ran his 100-mile record, he ran 11:19:13, I think, and he was taking in 30 to 40 grams of carbs per hour, which is, I mean, that's a fourth of what some athletes are doing. But Zach follows more of a low carb, high fat diet approach. So one of the things that I've done is I've really made sure to change my diet over while I've been over here too. One is for iron, which you mentioned earlier, and two is to make sure that I prepare myself well for my racing. So what that looks like for me right now is I'm eating about a cup of rice twice a day, which sounds like a lot of carb, but that's my maximum amount of carb. And then I'm either eating 2 burger patties or 2 chicken thighs, along with 3 eggs. So with that, I'm getting the amount of iron I need. I'm getting pretty much all of my nutrients. That's almost my diet right now. That, and then I'll do oatmeal with honey, and I might throw in some apples or banana or things like that, but very little. So with that, I'm going to be tapering off the rice more and more as I go, along with increasing fat consumption. I'm cooking all my stuff. My rice is cooked in probably 2 tablespoons of butter or more right now, along with olive oil in it as well. So, I mean, I'm getting in a lot of fat still, which rice isn't necessarily a high glycemic for me. So that's one of the things I look at. And so I don't think I'm going to need as much going in during race. I think I can probably stay pretty well around, 320-ish calories per hour, which I think is around maybe 70 grams. I would have to check on that, but I think it's like 70, maybe 80 grams of carbs per hour. If you think like 1 Martin per hour or 1 Science and Sport per hour, that's pretty much what I'm doing. And the reason for that is, one, I'm not as fat adapted as Zach is, and I don't think that I can't do that. I'm not that disciplined. But I think that I forget where I was going, what I was saying. Anyway,
you were
I lost
talking,
my.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's totally okay. I think we get a good idea of like how you're
Yeah.
thinking about your like nutritional strategy. Like sounds like about like, 70 to 80 grams of carbohydrates per hour. And you figure that out through like, estimating like, okay, how much fat am I burning right now versus how much carb am I burning? So that way you're not like, overloading the system, and you're getting like a little bit better of an idea of like, hey, like what can I tolerate to take in versus like what is the current notion
Yeah,
to take in,
that's that, that's what I was mentioning. It can be really helpful for athletes too, is, one of the things we have to think about is what's going to be the easiest on me. If we're trying to run really fast, really long, in my opinion, eating solid foods isn't always the best approach, because it takes so much more. If you think about it, you have to send more blood to the stomach, you have to invest more energy in digesting that food. Whereas if you take in a sip of a drink that has the same amount of calories, you've done the same thing, but you've made it 10 times easier for your body. So that was the other thing I was going to mention with that. I think that can be really helpful for athletes that want to go faster, but they don't know exactly what piece that they could change to make themselves go faster.
Yeah, as a relatively, well, not relatively, as a very small human myself, I only have so much like stomach real estate. So like, like it's been like definitely game changing for me to like try to like pack in as much nutrition into like one thing as I can, So that's been kind of my go-to is like, okay, let's try to like optimize the liquid nutrition first, because if I like, we need to drink water, we need to have hydration, right? And
Yep.
we need calories and we need electrolytes. And there's no reason why we can't get a bulk of that already into the bottle that's carrying my water regardless. So I think sometimes too, like if that like streamlines your like race execution of like, okay, now I'm not eating 4 gels an hour, which takes up so much real estate in your stomach. And then also having to take in like 20 to 30 ounces of liquid per hour, which takes, space in your stomach. All of those, like having to move your arms, like for all of the gels and ripping open packages and stuffing away candy wrappers and things like that. And then
Yep.
putting the bottle to it kind of streamlines the movement all to just one sip and go,
Yep.
So, for your liquid nutrition, what are you going to be, what are you going to be using?
I'm thinking I'm going to use Science and Sport again.
Okay.
It's been a really good go-to. I used to use Martin. I like Science and Sport better. It tastes better, I think. They have a berry flavor that I like a lot. Fortunately, I haven't had too much pain with Science and Sport yet. If you've ran ultras for a while, you know that eventually you start to associate certain things with pain. So if you ever ate something when you were young that you threw up that you still won't eat to this day, then that's exactly what I'm talking about when you start to associate something with pain. So I think Science and Sport will be good. I've used Liquid IV in the past. I'm still looking at, what electrolyte am I going to use, what's best. So I haven't nailed that one down yet. But as far as the sodium side, probably 500 to 1,000 milligrams per hour, I found is generally pretty good.
Good.
So
And then, so how are you going to be getting all of your nutrition? Do you have crew, or are you going to be using drop bags?
yeah, so Riley, so it's actually this year was our 10th anniversary. So we decided we were going to do a trip, and we decided on Greece, and then we also decided on Spartathlon. So part of what we'll do is for the time that we stay in Athens, we will drive the course. One of the things I always recommend to people when they go to a new place and they have crew is just drive the course with your crew and make it a fun thing. It'll make it so that they know where they're going. You don't have any bad turns and end up missing your hydration and things like that. So yeah, we'll drive the course and everything. She'll be crewing me and making sure I get everything, which at this point she knows me so well. She knows if I'm doing certain things, what to change and all of that. So
Beautiful. So you have crew, you're coming
Congratulations on 10
prepared.
years.
thank you.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's a long time to be stuck with me.
Well, it's a long time to see your growth, and I'm sure she has a really unique and interesting perspective of your growth and trajectory through the sport too. So
For sure.
So will there be any other American runners there this year that you're familiar with?
Camille is going to be there again. So it's going to
Okay.
be exciting to see her. There are multiple other American runners too, though. I don't want to try and mention them because I'll forget somebody. I don't want to do that, but we'll have multiple American runners there. So yeah, Bob
Nice.
Hearn will be crewing this year. So I just saw that. So it's going to be a good year.
Nice.
So.
well, we are very excited for you. We can't wait to see how everything goes. I think we had a really productive conversation today just about how like your travels have been going the past couple weeks, how you've been preparing given the travel, the altitude, the heat, the factors that you're going to be thinking about for the race, as well as how you're currently training and what you're going to be doing for race execution. Is there anything else that comes to mind that we haven't talked on that, is like, that you find value in for being prepared for race day?
I think we've hit a pretty well-rounded um, bit of things, I think. I don't know that there's anything that I would add at the moment.
Well, good. Coach Loretta, do you have anything else? Do you have any closing remarks, any final things?
Well, where can we follow you?
You can follow
Is
me
there a link?
on, yeah, Instagram or Facebook at the Jacob Moss. That's the
Okay.
easiest way. So I
All
post
right.
most of my stuff to Instagram, and if you search Jacob Moss, I should probably pop up. So that'll work.
Nice. And he's been really good about kind of sharing his workouts on a daily basis, so you can see a lot of things there. And will you be sending or posting a link to the Spartathlon so we can track you on that day?
I don't have a link yet, but I'll try
Okay.
to post one to Instagram or get it to you guys so that you can
Okay.
share it with everybody as
That
well.
would be great. That would be great.
Once
We
I
would
do
love
get it.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we have really enjoyed having you here, Jacob. Thanks for taking the time. What is it, like 9 o'clock at night now in France?
Yes, it's 8:57.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So that was a little coordination on our part because I'm in mountain time and I'm not sure what time zone France is. And then we have central time, but we all made it.
Yes, it works.
Yeah. Thank
For
God for
sure.
Google Calendar.
Yes.
Right?
So, all right. Well, thanks again for coming. And we're excited to follow the rest of your journey and see how things go at the Spartathlon.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys. Good luck,
Thank
Coach
you.
Jacob. Bye-bye.
Bye.